So we're back with our good friend of the show, Pete Blaber. Doesn't need an introduction. We're going to talk about Ukraine, and there's a lot going on. You're seeing the two wars being merged, possibly, Pete. You're seeing a lot of long-range attacks, assassinations, the interceptor issue. The front lines are still moving in Russia's direction. But, the blob is really trying to push a lot of narratives right now, and I want to dissect that. There's one article that came out, and let me just bring that up, from the Washington Times we were talking about, and it is about the merging of the two conflicts. So I'll bring that up, and you give me your opinion on why you think this is happening, please.
Yeah, well, thanks. Like everything, it's, we've been calling the Ukraine war the propaganda war. The fighting is real, but everything you think you know about how it started and why it's continuing is propaganda. And that's, that model has just slipped right over to the Iran war. It has become even a bigger propaganda war in a different way because the actors are different. You got the IRGC now colluding with global mainstream media. And I mean that colluding is just based on common interest. They're not meeting in back rooms. Their common interest is, cast negative shade on the U.S. and Trump specifically. And I'll be damned if, anything like safety and security gets in the way. So, we've got two massive propaganda wars. And, my advice to people before I get in and talk about it a little bit is just same thing as with Ukraine. Don't believe anything you see in the mainstream media. Don't believe videos now. Everyone should know that anyway, the way AI is gone. But do not believe what you hear. And this current period, which we're about to talk about, is a prime example of why you just can't do that. So, on the Iran side, it's not only been playing out on the battlefield, but on the internet as a more intense propaganda war than even the Ukraine war. And this extends to the parallel concept now with the Houthis. They've joined in, and you'll hear some of these statistics in a minute about what they're doing on social media. But, another catalyst for this bringing the two wars together is Zelensky himself.
Yes.
Who sees this as the Iran involvement is nothing more than a revenue pipeline to keep himself in power and to keep the war going against Russia, because he's absolutely desperate right now, reading the kind of the tea leaves of disinterest and impotence of the EU and Trump's signals to him, which I think were loud and clear when he traveled to DC last week. At the same time, Netanyahu did. So, I think fortunately in that regard, President Trump is the missing link that would make these two wars merge, because I believe, based on what you and I know from our various sources, but from one specific source that you and I both talked to, a Trump advisor, he gets what's happening. He gets the importance of Russia. And, Rubio met with Lavrov last week in Moscow. And I believe the purpose of that was to continue to further that working behind the scenes together and to see what would need to happen in order to get help from Russia on ending the Iran war. And I believe those backroom discussions are ultimately what will keep this thing from morphing together. But the propaganda war itself is real, and it's important to point out some of the statistics. If you remember when the Houthis joined the war, which their first strike was on July 13th, so second week of July. And that strike was on a familiar airfield. I recognized it right away, the Abha International Airport. It's in southwestern Saudi Arabia. And sure enough, CNN Arabic, along with Al Jazeera, pressure tested the video and found that the most watched clip was actually from the 2019 attack by the Houthis on the same airport. And then the second most watched video turned out to be not even from the airport. The second video was the fiery after effects of the drone strikes. That turned out to be from 2022 Aramco storage fire in Jeddah. So, the propaganda is heavy. Iran is kind of taking this into modern times. They're using AI more than anyone that I'm aware of has used AI for propaganda purposes.
Yeah.
And same thing. There's a number of companies who document, this propaganda, and one found over 145 million views within days, using tens of thousands of fake accounts, 145 million views of Iranian IRGC propaganda. And then Clemson just came out with a study that cited IRGC linked accounts pushing AI generated content across X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and witnessed again by tens of millions of people.
On that AI theme, it came out that I think Brad Parscale is running a multi-million-dollar campaign with a bunch of different online news sites, not necessarily impact a public opinion, but to train the models with a bunch of online websites that people don't even go to, but the content's on the web so that it trains the large language models. I found that interesting. I'm sure Iran's doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, and that's what AI, that's its whole purpose. It's all based off language models. But yeah, it's incredible. And again, to our viewers, it just, the same word of advice: don't believe anything you see or hear. Pressure test it. Look for, multiple data points on anything you're wondering about or trying to answer. And somewhere in between, look for hard empirical evidence. We're going to talk about that with Ukraine in a minute on the battlefield, the actual maps. But I'll just end with this on the Iran IRGC propaganda and Houthi propaganda. It's expected that countries, especially super intelligent countries like Iran, would shift to something like this. But what's hard to stomach is that the global MSM is just complicit with them, is not checking any of this. So for Al Jazeera to expose the fake opening shots of the war by the Houthis should alone be memorialized. Al Jazeera stands alone as the only mainstream media outlet that called out the propaganda. So it's just disgusting. Not just turning a blind eye to Iranian propaganda, but actually colluding with them and their obsession. I think we have a couple of screenshots of stories. Their obsession with saying the U.S. is out of ammunition, which I know from a very trusted source is, again, completely fake and made up. But they harp it all they can, and it has a two-prong effect. It's propaganda to the Western world who are watching this, trying to form an opinion, but it's propaganda back to Iran saying, hey, look, they're running out of ammo. You only need to hold on a little bit longer, and it'll all come out in your favor. So,
that story has been, I've been noticing that depleted ammo story they have been working that hard across multiple vectors in the media. And yeah, I'm sure we have a problem with interceptors and with some very sophisticated missiles or other types of ammunition, but I know the Pentagon is on this. I'm in the Pentagon press corps. I get all the emails. I mean, they are signing. I got 8 contracts signed today with different types of high-end manufacturing or even low-end manufacturing at scale for drones and all that stuff. So I know it's a problem, but it's not like it's not being dealt with, and they're acting like the war's over. And I just don't think that's the case, because it's not over because us not having anything to shoot with. That is, in my faults.
Right. But again, it complicates things. And, another example of something you never thought you'd see as an American, but it's here, and we got to get used to it.
You,
So, switching to the Ukraine battlefield, you mentioned the front lines, the propaganda war. I think 2 days ago marked the end of Zelensky's 40-day special military operation, his title, not mine. And it comes with incredibly ominous undertones for the people of Ukraine. The carefully constructed facade of success that was meant to drive this and orchestrate this PR campaign, which was both directed specifically at Western leaders like President Trump, but also at the Western world to
mhm.
maintain support for continuation of the war. And that facade has been violently torn away to reveal Ukraine basically at this point, because nothing worked as they thought it would, down on its knees begging for a ceasefire.
Yeah,
And Russia's recent attacks over this last week uh, have revealed this catastrophic situation for Ukraine. They really don't have any patriots
yeah,
left to stop ballistic missiles, and it's the ballistic missiles that do the damage. Just 2 nights ago, Russia fired 27 ballistic missiles, and Ukraine said they took only one down. And I believe a total of 85% of all UAVs are making it through because they're actually out of ammo. And they're out of ammo because they used it all on this 40-day PR campaign.
yeah,
Zelensky now, again, you don't hear this from the Western press, is proposing multiple ceasefire offers to Russia. One includes halting mutual strikes in the airspace. They tried that once, or they had it for the Russian Christmas, and attacks on enemy infrastructure. Ceasefire on infrastructure in both countries. And so, that was the purpose of the 40-day war, but it really backfired on him because, first off, just a point on Russia, 2 weeks ago, and I think we showed a story about this on the show, revealed that Putin's giving one of his press conferences talking about Ukraine pleading with Russia, back channels for various ceasefires, various levels of ceasefire.
mhm.
The global MSN mocked him, said this is Russia propaganda, and now it's become reality, and it underscores something else that's a pattern throughout this whole thing. And it's not, you don't have to be a Russia backer or against Russia to admit this, but Putin rarely, if ever, lies about what's happening on the battlefield or what's going on in negotiation. He's
Mhm.
very straightforward, and I'm not saying this in anything other than an objective way, but he was telling the truth here, and it once again reality and time proved him out. So we talked about the 40-day campaign. It's the same thing in a different package that's been going on now, since 23 at least. And it's really shows the irresponsibility of Ukraine leadership, specifically Zelensky, because he just fired Syrskyi and Fedorov. He's not making strategic decisions. He's making these off the cuff political decisions with his military.
Yes.
And the pattern is this: every time Ukraine has what is reported as some successes, and in this case, we'll call some of the long range strikes successes, and then a couple of counterattacks. They had one down south, a very big one that failed, and also one in outside Pavlovsk. They did another counterattack there that failed. But the same thing happens every time. As soon as the PR window for these actions dries up, they get hit twice as hard, lose twice as much ground, and the the people of Ukraine and their army are in much worse stead than they were before it.
Yeah.
Right now marks, I don't want to call it a turning point, but it's certainly important to look at the foundational patterns that have availed themselves against Ukraine right now. And the first is what we just mentioned, the missile interceptor shortage. And that's real. And it puts them, it puts them in a really bad position because Russia is basically picking its targets around Kyiv, and the small, tiny, infinitesimal organic military industrial capability of Ukraine is now all but evaporated. And the second thing going against Zelensky right now is the political crisis of his own making. Fedorov was very popular, and so firing him, who, basically was, had two kind of agendas: the digitalization of the army and the anti-corruption of the army, which, together probably have something to do with the real reason he was fired.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's causing a lot of problems, still internal discord for Zelensky. And then, as you
Also,
showed,
he fired the ambassador, who was shown to have gotten extremely wealthy being the ambassador to the U.S. That's a problem.
Yeah.
All these people in positions of power. We did a story back on the head of the central bank. I forget her name, Elvira or something, 10 years ago, and she was running the central bank and went to London, left the country, and bought a flat for 35 million pounds or something like that. So, they get massive amounts of money in these positions, and the people know it,
Yep, but she was fired and for blatant corruption, and you didn't hear a peep out of the mainstream media or the global media about it. If that had been a Russian ambassador fired for, tens of millions of dollars of personal corruption, it would be all over the place, and it would be a talking point that would be included in every discussion about the Ukraine war. So again, as you always point out, there's not just the propaganda, there's the propaganda by omission. And this is certainly one part of it, but the other part is what's really going on in Ukraine. You had a great article yesterday about the continued forced conscription, the violent forced conscription of Ukrainian citizens to be sent to the front line. We've been reporting on that nonstop. It's still happening nonstop, and it's a zero-sum game. The deaths in Ukraine far outnumber the births right now, and their manpower pool was a zero-sum game a long time ago, and it is down as close to zero as you can get. So just when they need more men, they find themselves without any.
Let me play this video real quick so people can see what we're talking. This is
the
mobilization that is going on in Ukraine. Mobilization with an asterisk. This is a woman and her boyfriend were driving in the car in a taxi, and they were stopped by the bounty hunters. And this is the result.
The pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down, and doctors' offices were shut down, and even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
A warm welcome here at the National Press Club. Welcome to the journalists, welcome to the Embraer team, and welcome to the other guests that we have here. We're going to announce, and as some of you guessed it right when they came in, the first E2 order by an American operator. And that operator is Avello. We believe this is really a strategic shift to unlock profitability for the customer. I'm very pleased that we have Andrew Levy here as the CEO of Avello, and I'm very pleased to give the stage to share a little bit more about what Avello is going to do with the E2 195. Thank you very much.
couldn't be more excited to be here as part of this historic announcement. We have such a great cultural fit as companies, so we're very, very excited to be Embraer's newest customer. We launched our airline in April of 21, and our target is focusing on small secondary airports of large metro areas. We've carried over 8 million customers since we started on 63,000 flights. And we've done all these things with 1,200 of the greatest crew members I could ever imagine having, and many of them are here with me today. This is the right airplane for us. It's going to open up opportunities for us that no other aircraft can serve. The best thing about the airplane, of course, is you will not find a middle seat on this airplane. It doesn't exist. We won't have any to offer. It's going to be the best cabin in the United States, and we're so excited about that. This is going to elevate our experience to the highest level, and we think our customers are absolutely going to love the airplane.
Дай телефон. Пошли вон! Пошли вон! Мне 19 лет!
It's hard to watch, but you see them, they're spraying pepper spray in the woman's face. I mean,
Yeah.
there's another video that I had that I don't have in front of us where bounty hunters going after a family, the men in the family, and there were women trying to stop them, and they shot one woman, ran over another woman with a bus, and pepper sprayed the third. So, you know, this is not a country, as you always say, Pete, that really wants to fight for what's going on when you're doing that to
Right.
the people.
They realize they've been duped, and they realize that how many men that everyone knows, whether they're relatives or friends, go off to this war and then are never heard from again. So the problem is not only deaths, but it's that Ukraine won't report those deaths back to the families, so they can go a month, 6 months, a year, multiple years as the person's MIA, and they don't have to pay out the equivalent of what we call SGLI.
Well, also, a lot of the abductions by these bounty hunters are for private military formations, so there is no SGLI. The government literally, they don't pay anything. So
yeah.
the bounty hunters, I think 2,000 a head or whatever now for a person. And where is that money coming from? But anyway, back to you.
Yeah. So if I had to prioritize, it's the same two things that any common sense observer would have deduced all the way back in 22, 23. And that's the message is unsound to the Ukrainian people. The purpose of the war doesn't make sense. And the second thing is they have no organic military industrial complex. And you cannot sustain a long-term war without some sort of organic military industrial complex. If you're dependent on handouts, you have no chance of ever winning. And despite that being shown over and over again, with Zelensky coming hat in hand, begging for patriots last week, it's ignored again. And we pretend like it's not happening. You can be for Ukraine all you want. You can cheer as loudly, criticize anyone who says they're not going to win, but you can't deny these massive empirical facts. The people of Ukraine are not behind this war because the messaging, the purpose of the war doesn't make sense to them. And Ukraine, even if it was fighting at parity, cannot win because they don't have the ability to sustain themselves over time. And those are the two things that should be taken out. We mentioned, the results of making political decisions as a leader instead of military decisions for your people. And what's happened, again, unreported, is Russian advances on the front lines in July were the largest since 2024. And you remember 2024, summer, fall was where Russia retook Kursk and then continued driving into the Sumy region. I think I sent you a chart. Do you have that chart?
Yes. Yes.
So just so our viewers know, I monitor 5 of these mapping companies and individuals, and I take kind of an agglomeration of all 5. And this is pretty much in the middle right here from Lost Armor. Russia gained about 12,000 kilometers in July, and that's a lot of terrain. Putin is definitely, living the strategy that we've heard over and over. Russia's taking their time because they're protecting manpower, not sacrificing it. But even though they're taking their time, gains like that are hugely significant. And as we'll talk in a minute, they're on the outskirts of three key areas. And the first thing I have is from it's a message from a mercenary who's actually fighting on the Ukraine side. And he said, I have nothing good to report in terms of Donetsk direction, specifically the direction of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Russian drones are flying everywhere. Explosions are heard and often felt continuously. It's important not to sugarcoat the facts. It's bad. And spoken like a true guy on the ground, you can lie all you want, but it doesn't change what's happening on the ground. And I think Russia is used to that now. They don't really care what anyone says. They know what's happening.
Yeah.
Same thing. I had a source tell me he just came back from Odessa, where he witnessed while there an unprecedented Russian aerial offensive in response to, the Ukrainian deep drone strikes. And that offensive is completely blocked off the Ukrainian ports to the Black Sea, which brings Ukraine onto the edge of a economic disaster, which again, according to my source, appears completely underestimated and underappreciated by the international media. And I think there's a screenshot of the estimate is about 70 million each day from loss for Ukraine of exports. And so, Maersk this last week said they will no longer allow their ships to go to port in Ukraine. And that, again, risks being an economic disaster for Ukrainian farmers, their number one export. This is the peak of harvest season. We're just short of the peak. Their warehouses are overflowing. Many of them have been bombed, so they have a lack of storage space. And agricultural commodity prices have collapsed in Ukraine, so it's hard to project what they have. And I think one of their biggest exports is the sunflower harvest, which is just a few days away. So, the law of unintended consequences, which should have been intended, was violated here. They thought they could just do the 40-day PR campaign and Russia wouldn't respond, and that's how they responded. And now, as of right now, Ukraine is basically landlocked.
Yeah.
So the final thing I have is just the Telegraph story, the slow death of the coalition of the willing. If you can put that screenshot up.
Yep.
Yeah. So, it's just, if you just look across that group of individuals and think about leadership, and, their senseless obsession with defeating Russia and what it's caused, it's left all of their countries in ruins, economic ruins, social ruins. And there's a lesson about leadership here. Common sense leadership matters, and senseless leadership destroys. So when you make decisions for political reasons and for your own greed or your own personal reasons, they're always going to be senseless. And what's the definition of a common sense leader? It's someone who makes good decisions and solves complex problems that set the conditions for their people to succeed. And that's where all of these European leaders and Zelensky, on steroids, have gone off the rails. If you're not making decisions that'll enable your people to succeed, they can't be good decisions. And, that begs the question, so what's motivating all these guys to make these senseless decisions? And I go back to what you and I have been talking about. It's the censorship industrial complex, which is one thing they oversee is the fraudulent election complex. They're both part of the same enterprise. And if you look through that line of leaders right there, I think every one of them, except maybe I think that's Norwicki from Poland, was elected under suspicious circumstances. They were not popular, and they were elected in their country. And so they know if Ukraine falls, me and my predecessors have no way to get back in power. And desperate men make desperate moves. And that's my take on why you see this desperate clinging on to the war to keep trying to fool the people of the Western countries and of Russia itself of what's really happening. And it's a historically negative thing, but if the only thing that matters is that we learn from it, and we never allow leaders like this to take over countries and to run the world again like they did here, almost into the ground.
Completely agree. And I think the risk of them trying to start some nuclear conflict with Russia is extremely high. You know, you're seeing a lot of draft preparation. You're seeing a lot of foretelling of Russia striking Europe as pushback. I mean, they're obviously doing a lot of these strikes, yes, to harm Russia militarily downrange inside, you know, these far corners of Siberia where they've got bombers parked or whatever. But it's also to the same way they started the war, they kind of poked until the war got started. And I think that's what they're doing here. They're poking to try to get a response into Europe so then they can start the big conflagration that they're talking about. You had a couple other slides. Let me just throw these up.
Yeah, Russia, and I just say this on your point because it's a good one. It's the same. We talked about the senselessness of the Maidan protests and the overthrow of the Yanukovych government. The purpose was then to start a war in eastern Ukraine that would cast such a negative light on Putin in Russia that the Russian people would rise up and throw him out. So they still think that by bombing things like the Wildberries warehouse, this is going to make people mad at Putin. And it shows you just what I talked about, the senselessness of the decision-making in these leaders. It's the exact opposite. You know, Russia probably finds itself for the first time in no need of running things through their political communication sections because they don't need to make up propaganda. All they need to do is show videos of these European leaders spitting fire and talking about breaking apart Russia and ending Putin. All they're doing is making...
Well, there's a black cloud of smoke hanging over Moscow from all the Wildberry explosions, and they can't get...
And if your packages that say you had a small business and they all just burned, or you were waiting for this one package you saved up all your money for, are you going to be mad at Putin, or are you going to be mad at the Europeans and the Ukrainians for doing it? Same thing, bombing a restaurant with a Russian general in it, killing the waiter, the cook, the concierge, and three of the people in there who were just visiting the restaurant. All you're doing is a favor for them. You're making the war more popular, not less. You're making Putin more popular, not less. And for some reason, they're in denial. They can't see that. But that's what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, you're complete. And the assassinations have been a new tool. I mean, they're using them pretty regularly now. And also the, you know, they're trying to, I just wanted this slide you had up. One of the narratives being pushed is that Russians are help killing, you know, Americans. You know, I have no idea if that's true or not. I see it with skepticism. And then also Moscow's getting smashed over and over again. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what you're saying. They're hitting things that really aren't militarily significant, but they are significant in pissing off the population, you know? So
yeah, and this online magazine itself, every day, it's just a front for the pro-Ukrainian war, anti-Russia folks. Each day they talk about the drone strikes and they show pictures of cruise missiles and, you know, Iskanders. They don't even know what they're talking about. but
Yeah.
it shows you this effort, this desperate men make desperate moves, and the globalists are desperate right now, and they're going to cling on and do everything they can to keep that war going. And as you started this with, if possible, combine it with the Iranian war.
And that's the fear I have. You know, they struck a Russian tanker in the Caspian Sea, bringing stuff. Actually, it was an Iranian tanker headed toward Russia, and there's a lot of video of Ukrainians in masks coming out against Iran. I mean, it's a way of, as you said, continuing the war, but also maybe getting some sympathy and maybe a swap for Patriot missiles if we help you with Iran, or who knows what's in Zelensky's mind. You're right. Desperate men make desperate decisions. So, Pete, that's all I have. Anything you have today else?
Nope. I'm good too, Todd.
All right. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Sounds